16 games done on the Wolf3D engine retrospective. What a freaking journey. That's a lot of game. Anyway, we cannot of course finish this without ranking those games, so here we are, the Wolf3D engine retrospective ranked. So I'm gonna talk about this game as a very quick, brief review of each game in general, and I'm gonna start at the bottom to make it more interesting. And if I'm starting at the bottom, you know what comes first, of course. It's gonna be freaking Operation Body Count. A redunculous piece of shit. I hope to never see it again in front of me. It was... God, what a dumb game. So if you didn't watch it, it was a game made by Capstone Software. They don't make good games. They're no longer around, so there's something going for us there. But the Operation Body Count was absolutely horrible. You're supposed to rescue some hostages at the UN. You destroyed enough of the walls to not leave anyone alive anyway. And you had like very edgy, you have to kill the terrorists because they are vermin or whatever. And it had digitized actors, but not like Rise of the Triad. It was all shit. The graphics were very dirty and muddy, like the textures they used for the walls. They did try to add some stuff to the Wolfenstein engine, but the stuff they added was shit. Like the weapon bobbing didn't look proper, it didn't animate properly depending on the speed of your computer. The cinematics ran faster when there were less pixels moving on the video. And the game, like, even if you buy into the whole, okay, I'm going to the UN, I'm gonna kill a bunch of terrorists, and you're gonna use the CD music that we checked, like one track, it was some like Middle East Arab song, we noped right out of that. But let's say you're into that shit and you go in and the first 5 levels you're killing giant rats and some mutants then spring from the ground. And then you start killing terrorists. And they really like, okay, this is a building that has offices and offices look all the same. So we can have like 10 levels that have like this exact same layout. Change a few doors around and it's fine. And that's what they did. And it was horrible. It was very repetitive. 40 levels of very repetitive shit. During like 10, 15 of those levels you had a squad. And when I saw that you had a squad, I thought, okay, this is gonna suck. But it was actually really fun because you had like 4 players, you could switch between them, and you could like tell them, okay, you stay here and I switch to another one. Or you can you roam around killing enemies while I switch to someone else. And they could die, they would resurrect on the next level. And you could manage your health by doing that. Like, I'm on low health, I'm gonna switch to someone else. It worked way better than I expected. And then midway through the game, like, okay, we're done with this feature. They're all dead, you finish the rest of the game without them. And it became very annoying, very repetitive, very grindy. And then we got to the final boss. We couldn't find the boss because there was a secret wall that we had to push to find it. So we tried to destroy the walls by shooting at them with rockets. And the splash damage from the rockets goes across the wall. So we killed the boss inside the room without seeing the boss, without knowing the boss was there. We just killed it and got an ending. And then we reloaded, we tried it again, we killed it again. And on the 3rd time we did find a secret passage, we shot at him twice. From a distance he died again, he left while dying. I don't know, man. This game is shit. It belongs at the very bottom of this list. Because it's horrible, it's from Capstone Software, and you know what else is from Capstone Software? Freaking Corridor 7 Alien Invasion. Corridor 7 Alien Invasion is shit. Hello, Absentia. You got here just in time for the final review of the Wolf3D engine retrospective. We just You missed the part where we killed the final boss of Rise of the Triad 10 times and the game kept crashing. It was glorious. And we finished it twice after solving the crashes. It has a true ending, we had to... Anyway, it was a whole thing. Anyway, nice to have you here, Absentia. So Corridor 7 was Capstone Software, so it was shit. But it wasn't bland shit like Operation Body Count, so it was better than Operation Body Count. Not because it was good, but because Operation Body Count was boring, dumb, and bland. Corridor 7 wasn't bland. Main problem with it is that it had 40 levels. The first 30 were the main version, the floppy version. The version that came on floppy disks, and all of those levels required you to kill all of the enemies on every level, except for the last level. And that made the game very slow and boring and annoying and repetitive, and sometimes you would spend like 30 minutes trying to find that one last enemy. Final 10 levels were very different and very fun because you just had to find the exit. We had a second final boss. The city version had these additional 10 levels, so in the end the game kind of like ended with a good last impression. So I don't think badly of it, but if I start playing the first level again, I'll remember how shit it is. So yeah, it's not good, but it's way better than Operation Body Count. Okay, next game on the rank is Hovertank 3D. Now, it's very important to keep in mind that from a technical standpoint, Hovertank 3D is a very old game. It was made with a prototype version of the Wolf3D engine. It has severe technical limitations. If you go into the game keeping that in mind, the technical limitations are fine, you can deal with them. The game is incredibly good and interesting for what it does. The story is actually kind of fun. The controls are shit, but they were the best they could come up with at the time. And normally I would have ranked this game higher. The problem with it is that the game design did not take the technical limitations into consideration, so the game requires you to do combat without strafing against enemies that shoot you as soon as they see you. You die in 3 hits, so if they have a group of 4 or 5 enemies and you turn a corner wrong, you die instantly, you can't do anything. Navigating the map is very difficult, because it doesn't have mouse support, I don't think. And you keep hitting the walls and the tank makes this very loud sound every time you hit a wall. And you have to find a bunch of hostages on a radar that doesn't work very well. And they put it on a timer. So it was mostly a problem of the game design, like making the game way harder than necessary because it did not take into consideration. Like there are two kinds of levels, like Overtank starts with levels that are too easy, almost boring. And it ends with levels that are nearly impossible. There are like 2 or 3 levels in the middle that are good. So that's why I have it ranked low. One of those levels was so absurd because to finish the level, you had to rescue all of the hostages. Hostages that are killed, you don't have to rescue, of course. As soon as every hostage is either dead or killed, either dead or rescued, I should say, a portal opens and you go to it. And on some levels the portal opened on the other end of the map and the timer ran out before you could get there multiple times. It was frustrating as hell. On one of the levels, 3 of the hostages, we could not get to them. I spent like 3-4 attempts on the level trying to get to them until I realized they were in a closed room that had no entrance. And that room had like 3 enemies inside it. And we had to get close to the hostage on the other side of the wall so the enemy would come towards the hostage and kill it. We had to manipulate the enemies to kill those 3 hostages so we could complete the level. It was absurd. That's absurd game design. And it's just like really messing up because the technical aspects, they are fine for the time, but you know, you can't have that kind of level design with those kind of limitations. Anyway, next on the list we have a trifecta. The Gamer's Edge Catacomb games. So I'm gonna talk about Catacomb 3D later. It is much higher on the list. The thing about Catacomb 3D, it was made with a prototype version of the Wolf3D engine. It's way better than Hovertank, but not quite Wolfenstein 3 level. Wolfenstein 3D level. So these games from Gamer's Edge use the same engine from Catacomb 3D. They have the same problems, the same limitations, and the main problem is that they used like the same game mechanics. Now the game mechanics on Catacomb, they are very limited. You have one weapon, a few scrolls that you can use that are mostly useless, and that's it, really. It was very limited, and I really don't want to get ahead of Catacomb 3D before I get to it, but the reason Catacomb 3D worked was because it was short. These games were like 4 hours each, and they were full of bullet sponge enemies. It got to a point where we're just doing like percussive combat on the keyboard. Just hit both control keys as fast as you can, wait for the enemy to die, move on a bit, find another enemy, resume, until the levels were done. So there wasn't enough mechanics to sustain 3-4 hour games. That's why they are ranked low. There were plenty of good stuff here, and they are ordered by inverse order of release, because they got slightly better as they went on. Basically, Armageddon had skeletons coming out of the walls, which was fantastic. You could see the skeleton in the wall, you could see the skeleton turning into a skeleton trying to get out of the wall, and then it would get out of the wall. It was very clever use of animation. They had evil ants that got on fire, they had submerged creatures on sewer levels. It was very interesting. The third one had a lot of that, and it also had like futuristic maps, because there's time gates, and it had a hub, you travel between places. Those games were oozing with level variety, enemy variety. They just didn't have the mechanics to sustain 3 full games. That's why they're ranked low. If all of these was just a single game that was like 2-3 hours long, it would be ranked much higher. After this, some people surprised that it's ranked so high. I have Supernova's Arc 3D. This game was way better than I expected. Everyone talks shit about it. I checked because people know the SNES version. You giggled. It's not bad. I actually looked at a video of the SNES version thinking, well, maybe they're complaining about the SNES version because maybe that version is too different. It isn't. It's the same version, some graphical differences. But like, it was good. It was not too long. It had variety. It had 6 different weapons with 3 types of ammo. Hello, Samuel Stokes. How's it going? Were you here yesterday for the crashing of Rise of the Triad? We managed to crash it once today, but we managed to finish it at least, so we're ranking the games finally. I know you were here yesterday, I just don't know if you were here for the 2 hours of... You weren't around. 50 minutes trying to kill a boss that could not be killed, you had to wait for it to leave, and the more you shot at it, the longer it took. Then 20 minutes to kill the final boss, and it crashed the game, then another 40 minutes trying to kill it without crashing the game, and it didn't work. And it still crashed once today. On different computers, different versions of the game, it's just... I don't know, something with my save file, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, Supernova's Arc 3D, way better than I expected. I took a look at the SNES version. It has one thing better than the PC version. Because of the limitations of the hardware, the weapons graphic is much smaller, so you can actually use a weapon and see the enemy at the same time. Biggest problem in Supernova's Arc 3D is that the enemies start speeding at you as soon as they saw you, and they had hit scan weapons, except for some of the bosses. So you walk somewhere, you start taking damage, it's random damage, you die very fast. Later levels on top of that had very little in the way of health pickups, ammo pickups, so the game got really freaking hard near the end. Final boss was fantastic. It was a bear that looked like a beaver, and when you found him, he was inside a bush. Like, he's standing carrying a bush with him. And you kept shooting at him. At some point he would drop the bush would remain on the ground. So I assume that's like the code from Mecha Hitler from Wolfenstein 3D. and then he would come arms raised trying to attack you. The game was a lot of fun, and at the end they had like the animals leaving the ark in 3D with a roll call for the bosses and everything. This game was way better than I expected. I'm not gonna rank it much higher because it is mostly a reskin, but it had a lot of new stuff and the maps were all original and the auto map was great. So yeah, not gonna complain more about it. Let's move on to the next game, which is gonna be 2 again. Catacomb and the Catacomb. These games were not made with the Wolf3D engine. I included them in the list for historical reasons, and because by doing so I would have all of the Catacomb games done on this retrospective as well. These are 2D games made by John Romero and John Carmack. And they were, like, I'm glad I played them, they were so much fun. Catacomb was very short, it just introduced some of the mechanics. It was very simple, very straightforward, but very fun. The Catacombs, also known as Catacomb 2, was phenomenal. Like, it was, I believe, 20 levels. Level 10 was like a hub. You would go to different levels, you would collect clues as scrolls, and you have to solve puzzles to figure out where to go. It was awesome, like, for such a simple game, you had so much satisfying stuff in there. They were new enemies, then you would go through the different levels, circles of hell. It had a lot of jokes, like you were walking through the pyramids and you have like the Great Pyramids, and then next to it the not so great pyramid. You would have a level called Fraudsters, the Circle of Hell for Fraudsters. It had a cell filled with video game publishers, amongst others that I can't mention right now without starting some kind of political shitstorm. But you get the idea. It was a lot of fun, had a lot of jokes. It was very fluid. And the goal of the game was to defeat the final boss and come out with the treasure. And so we had a full screen that took us like 2 minutes to harvest of treasure. And the ending screen was like this little cart coming out of the castle, just buckling under the weight of all the treasure, with all these coins and chests like falling along the way because you can't carry everything. These games were fantastic. I really, if you want something simple, 2D, to spend a couple of hours on, you can do a lot worse than that. Next on the list, Wolfenstein 3D. This is like technically the main game on the engine. We have games that came before it, and we have most games came after it. And it's a very good game, it's very fast, it was amazing for the time. I had my mind blown as a kid when I first saw it. The reason it's not ranked higher is because there was a lot of bullshit on the later episodes. And this is a personal rank list, so there are things that I consider okay to be bullshit, there's some that I don't consider okay to be bullshit, and Wolfenstein 3D, for me, it really failed in terms of level design. They had some really winding, horrible levels, especially in episode 5. It has no auto map, you would just get lost, walk in circles. There was a level that I went around in circles for like 50 minutes. I literally pulled up a map online of the level after spending 50 minutes on it, and then I learned that there was a mandatory secret wall that I had to push. There was no indication, nothing suspicious about it, just some random part of the level you had to push it to find a key. So because of that alone, I'm ranking Wolfenstein 3D as low as I am. You can notice that I haven't been through Spear of Destiny yet, which means the Spear of Destiny doesn't have those problems. But yeah, that's my problem with Wolfenstein 3D. Level design on later levels. But it's a fantastic game. We're like on the upper half of the list anyway, so everything here is good. Speaking of good, the next 2 games on this list are the Blakestone games, Aliens of Gold and Planet Strike. They were both really good games. Nothing to complain about, really well designed, fun, they had auto maps, they had a good level of challenge, good variety. And I'm ranking Aliens of Gold slightly higher than Planet Strike just because it was fresher. Planet Strike was mostly reusing stuff. I liked some of the changes that it did, but I think Aliens of Gold deserves more of an accolade, just because it introduced a lot of that stuff first. The bosses were more fun, even though it was long. It was like traditional 6 episodes. I didn't feel tired with it at all. Planet Strike was also good. I had a difficult time selecting one of them to be on top of the other, but yeah, this is what I'm going with. Fantastic games, absolutely recommended. Then, as I've mentioned, I'm gonna have Spear of Destiny, because it has all the qualities of Wolfenstein 3D without the problems of Wolfenstein 3D. They did some minor changes to the engine, nothing too material, too important. And the level design was fantastic, nothing to complain about the level design. 20 levels, all very tight, very properly designed, I'd say. The bullshit for Spear of Destiny was the difficulty of the enemies, but that's fine. If the difficulty on your game is dealing with the enemies, not the resources, not the level design, if it is the enemies, and we're talking about a first-person shooter, that is fine. That's acceptable. They're the kind of challenge that you do expect. So they really nailed how to make a game hard, even sometimes being frustrating, but fair. I'm not a fan of difficult games in general, but Spear of Destiny was great, and one of the reasons I rank it this high, is because the final level, it surprised me. It was fantastic. I felt like, for a second there, I felt like I was playing Doom. I did not expect what I saw. And then he had a bunch of ending screens with amazing pixel art, and then he had some digitization of concept art for the ending screens. It was like, it really threw me for a loop how polished the end of the game was. And I really thought Spear of Destiny was just like Wolfenstein 3D, but more levels. And it kind of is, but they did a fantastic job. Third on the list, we have Catacomb 3D. Basically, you guys heard me gush about the Catacomb, with simple but fun mechanics, with a hub, with puzzles to solve around the hub, and then return to linear levels. It's linear, hub, then back to linear. Catacomb 3D is the same as the Catacomb, but in 3D. It's not the same game, it's not the same levels, but it's the same idea. It's a few linear levels, a hub, another few linear levels, some puzzles to solve so you can progress. There were some bullet sponges, but only on a very specific level. Then we went back to finishing the game. It was short and sweet. It was like, what, less than 2 hours to finish, I think. It was a fantastic game, and like I mentioned on the other Catacomb games, that's how long you can have a game with those limited mechanics. Mechanics were fine, they just didn't support a long game, so they really nailed everything on Catacomb 3D. If you're gonna play only one Catacomb game, this is the one to play. If you're only gonna play 2, you should play the Catacomb and then Catacomb 3D. If you're gonna play more than 2, I suggest you don't. Maybe the first Catacomb for curiosity's sake. Second game on the list, I'm gonna put Rise of the Triad there. Yes, the third boss was a lot of bullshit. Yes, the fourth boss was 50 minutes of not realizing I had to do nothing and wait for him to leave. And then the final boss was 40 minutes of crashing. But other than that, the game was awesome, the graphics are awesome, the digitized actors fit into the game because they did a very good pixel art work on top of them. The music by Bobby Prince was absolutely out of this world. It was a treat to listen to it the entire game. Level design was very varied, not too annoying. There was one level that was stupid, everything else was fine. Auto map was really good. Really, other than like some little bit of bullshit here and there. Fantastic. As far as first person shooters go, it's the best one on this list. not much to complain about. I just wished it didn't crash as much as it did on the final boss. I couldn't believe the crashes. Holy shit, I'm still not over it. I'm still not over it because I tested on DOSBox, it crashed. I tested on PCM, it crashed. I tested the Steam version, it crashed. So I tested two different versions of the game, CD version and I don't remember the other one, it crashed on both. So the only thing that could have been the problem was my save file. So I kind of fixed it by dying to the boss, not reloading, spending life restarting the level. And then still it crashed once. And then the final boss you had to like avoid it while trying to find secrets on the level so you could get the true ending. I don't like when they do that. Well, that's the bad stuff. Everything else about Rise of the Triad. How well it ran, considering like all the graphical advancements it had on the same emulated hardware as the other games. It ran very well, very smooth game. Biggest problem with it, I suppose, according to Tom Hall himself, is that they shouldn't have insisted on the Wolf3D engine. They could have used the build engine, it would have been a better game, and it would have been less... it would have been less work. But overall, it's absolutely fantastic. And now for number one of the list, the only game that isn't a first-person shooter, Shadowcaster. Now, I might be biased because I'm tired of first-person shooters. This one wasn't. But really, this game is amazing. This is the second game by Raven Software. You can really see the seeds for what would become Heretic and Hexen later. And it has a lot of variety. The levels, I really liked how they... Okay, it's a little bit linear, now we have a hub. Now it's linear again, now we have another hub. Now it's linear again, so it kept things fresh. Because if it is always a hub, you get into the situation I have with Hexen, where you just can't stand anymore trying to go back and forth, trying to figure out where to go. If it is just linear, it's good but less interesting. So they mixed it up really well, it had a lot of variety, it had some interesting puzzles. My only problems with the game were resource management, because you were always out of health and power, and you had only very limited ways of recovering those. And the fact that the enemies took too long to kill, we compounded on the problem of resource management. If you could like rest and recover all of your resources, that would fix everything with the game, really. It ran well, it looked awesome, it played really well. I have no complaints. The two additional levels on the CD version were absolutely unnecessary, and they made the final boss way harder. Because instead of ending a level that you can rest calmly before going to the final boss, you have to rush through a barrage of monsters and get to the final boss with no resources and no time to recover. But yeah, those would be the only complaints I would have. It's an amazing game. If you like dungeon crawlers and you've never seen it, you should. Automapper was fantastic. It had a very good automapper for the time. It was the best automap up until that point of all of these games. So yeah, this is the Wolf3D engine retrospective. It's done, it's finished.